Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This video uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're diving into Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. This novel, it still fascinates readers over a century later, and for good reason. You'll get a solid understanding of why as we uncover those captivating plot points and explore the thought-provoking themes and symbolism within.
It's interesting how relevant this book remains, even in our modern world. So much of it speaks to anxieties I think we all have about aging, beauty, and the choices we make.
It really does.
Right.
Okay, so let's meet Dorian Gray. He's young, he's strikingly beautiful, and that beauty becomes a huge part of his story, both the good and the bad. Right from the start, we meet Basil Hallward, the artist completely captivated by Dorian's looks. And there's Lord Henry Wotton, this incredibly witty but cynical character who ends up having a big influence on Dorian's whole outlook on life. What struck you about how Wilde introduced these three key figures, especially in relation to the themes of beauty and influence?
Wilde sets up this fascinating dynamic right away. You have Basil, who sees true beauty in Dorian, almost a kind of purity. But Lord Henry, he's all about the fleeting nature of youth and the pursuit of pleasure. He's the one who plants that seed in Dorian's mind. The only way to get rid of temptation is to yield to it. And boy, does Dorian take that to heart.
He does. That brings us to Sybil Vane, the talented actress who Dorian falls for. Initially, he sees her almost as this embodiment of art and beauty. But as soon as her performance doesn't live up to his idealized image, he throws her away. It's brutal and leads to her tragic suicide.
That's the moment the portrait, the one Basil painted of Dorian, starts to change. It becomes this visual representation of his soul, reflecting all the darkness that's taking root inside him. And Dorian, he stays young and beautiful, untouched by the consequences of his actions, at least on the outside.
It's chilling to imagine, having this hidden mirror showing the true cost of your choices while everyone else sees only your unchanged beauty. It makes you think about how we often try to present this perfect image to the world, hiding the darker parts of ourselves.
Exactly. It's like social media today, everyone presenting a perfect image. Wilde was tapping into something very real about human nature, even back then. The portrait acts as this metaphor for the hidden self, a concept that's still incredibly relevant today.
And as Dorian continues down this path of seeking only pleasure, the portrait gets more and more horrifying. It's not just about a painting aging. It's about the consequences of living a life without any real morality, about prioritizing superficial things over true connections and empathy.
And we see that play out not only in the portrait, but in Dorian's relationships, too. Think about Basil, the artist who created that portrait in the first place. He becomes increasingly worried about Dorian, about the rumors surrounding his lifestyle. He tries to appeal to his conscience. But Dorian, he just rejects Basil's concern completely. In fact, he ends up murdering Basil. In a fit of rage when Basil sees the true state of the portrait, it's like he's trying to kill off any part of himself that still has a conscience.
Wow. It's almost as if the portrait itself becomes a character in the story, this looming presence that drives Dorian's actions.
Absolutely. It represents the weight of his choices, a constant reminder of the corruption he's trying to hide from the world.
And he goes to extreme lengths to keep it hidden right. He manipulates someone into disposing of Basil's body, and later even encounters Sybil's brother, who's out for revenge. But because of the portrait's magic, Dorian looks exactly the same. So James Vane can't believe he's the man responsible for his sister's death.
That encounter is so symbolic. It shows that Dorian can't outrun his past, no matter how much he tries to bury it. The portrait is always there, a physical manifestation of his guilt and the decay eating away at his soul.
It's a powerful reminder that our actions have consequences, even if we try to pretend they don't.
Right. And as time goes on, Dorian becomes more and more isolated. He surrounds himself with beautiful objects, almost like he's trying to find solace in material things.
It makes you wonder, do you think he really enjoys any of it? Or is it all just a desperate attempt to fill the void created by his actions? It's like when we try to buy happiness with the latest gadget or fashion trend, only to find that it doesn't last.
That's such a great point. Wilde seems to be commenting on that very human tendency, to seek fulfillment in fleeting pleasures. Dorian's obsession with beautiful objects is a reflection of that emptiness.
And in the end, it all catches up to him. He realizes the portrait is not just a reflection of his soul, it's become his prison. He's trapped by this desire to stay eternally young, even as his soul withers.
And in a desperate attempt to break free, to erase the evidence of his sins, he tries to destroy the portrait, but in doing so,
he ends up destroying himself. It's such a powerful symbolic ending. The portrait returns to its original beauty, while Dorian's body is found aged and withered, reflecting the true state of his soul.
Exactly. It's a stark reminder that true beauty lies not in outward appearances, but in the integrity of our character.
Right.
You can try to hide from the consequences of your choices, but ultimately you can't escape yourself.
It's a tragic end, but it really makes you think, doesn't it? What would you do if you had a chance to stay young forever, knowing the cost?
That's the question Wilde leaves us wrestling with, isn't it? Is it worth sacrificing your soul for eternal beauty? The Picture of Dorian Gray is a powerful exploration of that very human desire to hold on to youth, to escape the consequences of our choices. But it also reminds us that true beauty, it doesn't lie in our appearance, but in how we live our lives.
Yeah, and how about those characters who tried to warn Dorian? Basil pleading with him to see the state of his soul, and James Vane seeking justice for his sister. They represent those voices of conscience that Dorian chose to ignore, voices that I think we all encounter in our own lives.
It's like those moments when we know we should do the right thing, but temptation pulls us in another direction. Dorian's story is a cautionary tale, reminding us that ignoring our conscience comes at a cost.
It's a book that really stays with you. Wilde's writing is so vivid, the way he uses symbolism in these larger-than-life characters to explore these really deep questions about morality, beauty, and the human condition.
It's considered a classic for a reason. It's a story that still resonates with readers today, because it speaks to those universal anxieties we all have. About aging, about making choices that we may regret later on.
And if anyone listening hasn't experienced this literary gem, I highly recommend picking up a copy and diving into the world of Dorian Gray. You'll find a link to purchase the book in the description below.
It's a book that will make you think. It will challenge you, and it will definitely spark some interesting conversations.
Absolutely. And don't forget to subscribe to Mindful Moments. For more insightful deep dives into the world of literature, we're here to help you nourish your mind, one book at a time,